So we got two terrific speakers today. Astronauts and Nobel laureates don't have anything on them. Okay, they're a representative of the management team at the San Jose Mineta International Airport, right? And I think we've all seen the airport grow up through the years, right? I remember 1974, I flew in with my father. I had hair back then, and coming down the stairway, right? There was no jetways or anything like that. And it's morphed into this beautiful, and I would say very proud facility. And it's sort of city within its cities is our airport. And two folks that we have here, ladies first, Julie Jarratt is here. She is the public information manager. So she gets to come here and talk to old guys like us and spread the word about how fantastic the airport is and also deal with the press. Thank you, Julie, for coming. You also spent a lot of time with the airlines and other dudes. She worked for Cathay Pacific Airlines, which is a pretty cool gig. And then we're honored to have Mookie Patel, the director of operations for the airport. And Mookie is in charge of basically the running of the airports outside the gates, the facilities, the runways, all that stuff. He's been busy with upgrading the administrative buildings recently, the maintenance facilities, been instrumental in trying to get some new airlines into San Jose and at an international airport, like our old friends, Frontier Airlines. We used to fly them to Kansas City, by the way. I used to go there. So anyway, we're privileged. Thank you for coming. Okay. And thank you for what you do for our community and your service our community. And one of the crown jewels of the South Bay is our airport. So I want to welcome Julie and Mookie. Thank you.
Gentlemen, please stay after the presentation for our song. We'll sing God Bless America.
Hello, gentlemen. Hi. It's kind of odd and also nice to be the only lady in the room. I'm not used to this. I'm Julie Jarratt, and as Mike said, I'm the Public Information Manager at San Jose Mineta International Airport. Thank you so much for having us here today. What a great invitation. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to hand over to the main guy, the big cheese, the boss, Mookie. Like Mookie, I was not born in this country. I was born in Canada to American parents and grew up about 15 minutes from here in Cupertino, and used to visit the airport all the time when my grandparents, who lived in Houston, would fly in on Continental. And we used to be able to go to the gate to welcome them. And as you said, Mike, I'd watch them come down the stairs. And so that always made a big impression on me. Little did I know that many years later, I would join the aviation industry. Back in 2012, I started a job at Cathay Pacific, which is an Asian airline. And I think I found the job advertised on Craigslist. You remember that? Remember Craigslist? And I thought, sure, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And little did I know it would open up this world of opportunities, and spent 12 years at Cathay before moving over to the airport about 2 years ago. I joined, I think, 3 months after Mookie. So he and I are buddies. Our start dates are a couple months apart. It's a dynamic and fun job working at the airport. There's never a dull moment, right? The TSA is always running smoothly, and actually it is. I will tell you that the media call me all the time to find out, what are the waits like? What are the lines like? And I always disappoint them when I go, actually, it's about a 2-minute wait. And they go, oh, I think they're hoping to get that visual of the lines out the door. But anyway, we love our airport, and next time you're flying out, please let us know, and we'd love to come and say hello. So Mookie and I work quite closely together as Mookie's spokesperson and the director of aviation. So we get to come out and do fun things like this. I also push Mookie in front of TV cameras from time to time. You might hear him on the radio sometimes. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And as I said, I'm going to pass over to Mookie, who's going to talk you through We have a brief presentation, and then if there's any questions at the end, please let us know. And we also brought some goodies for you all. So we'll pass those around, or maybe just take them on your way out the door, whichever is easiest. So I'm pleased to introduce Mookie Patel, Director of Aviation for San Jose Mineta International Airport.
Thank you. Wow. This was the first time she had to be the hype girl for me. So I never really like hype people, right? Because it just makes you feel bigger than you are. But I'm just Mookie Patel. I'm just Mookie. Mukesh is my real name. My mom nicknamed me Mookie when I was born because she really wanted a girl. And my nickname sounded more like a girl than a boy. So yes, a little bit about myself and my history before we get into the PowerPoint deck. I'm born in England, British by birth to parents from India. I grew up in England until I was about 12 and moved to Oklahoma. Yeah, I don't know how that happened. My son did this to me when we moved to Seattle because there's a lot of Native Americans there. And he comes home and he goes, Dad, I made a new friend. And he goes, what tribe are we from? And I said, like, okay, this is the different kind of Indian. We've got to go through this whole education process. But needless to say, I followed my passions. I went to college in the same town I grew up in, Stillwater, Oklahoma, got my degree in aviation management. I was a flying Aggie at Oklahoma State when it originally called Oklahoma A&M University. So go Pokes, go Cowboys. Immediately after I got my first job, I moved to Kansas City. I was in a 2-year management training program. And back in the 90s, we had a director that really was insightful looking into the future. He wanted to create these 2-year management training positions for kids that were coming out of school with an aviation management degree and at least give them an opportunity to train and learn different jobs. And so we moved around. I worked in airport operations. So I ran the snow desk at night and during the day. I packed polyperm in cracks and filling up sealants on the aprons. I worked in marketing. I wrote a business plan for SkyCaps. I worked in the parking and bus department, and I ended up in properties. And I really enjoyed properties, which is an airport controls a lot of their leasing inside of the footprint of the airport, and really enjoyed working with rental car companies and food and beverage companies, and airlines and leasing space to airlines, which led me to an airline consulting job. I worked in New York and San Francisco while I lived in Naples, Florida. So you can imagine traveling out to the West Coast and back to the East Coast. That was really a stressor on my wife and my 1-year-old at the time. So I worked on the opening of the International Terminal, SFO, and then I worked on the opening of JFK Terminal 1, which is now being demolished for a new terminal. So as you all can relate, things do get torn down in our lifetimes, and it's like, wait, I just was there. I knew that building when it came up out of the ground, and then somebody tears it down and builds something else. So I'm privileged to be where I'm at after 32 years of being in the industry. But from Naples, I moved to New Orleans. I was in the technology world there, selling airport technology, property management software, flight information display software, tracking grants and project software. And then I also did technical terminal planning work. From there, I moved to Seattle. I worked in Alaska Airlines, corporate real estate group, negotiating contracts and leases all over the state of Alaska with the state, and then Florida, up to Boston, down to LA. So I was all over the country. Had 34 airports in my portfolio. And then my kid needed to go to college. So airlines don't, as Julie knows, airlines don't really pay very well. They think that the travel benefits are the biggest benefit. So we moved to Denver. I learned a lot about oil and gas and farming, and I opened a new hotel and did all my airline leasing and rental car leasing. And then San Antonio was after that. Austin was a great place to learn business and finance and lead a team of finance folks at Austin. And all of those career experiences are really what's necessary to become an airport CEO. You can call it an airport CEO, you can call it an executive director, managing director general, or just a department director. And I prefer to leave all those big titles aside and I work for the city of San Jose, and I run a department. And my department is the aviation department. So proud to be there. So if we can run up the slide deck, I can kind of go through. And is everybody able to hear me, or shall I hold this a little bit closer? Is that better? Okay, good. Okay. So at San Jose Mineta, I'm privileged to work alongside about 282 employees. We're probably one of the leanest run airports in the country at a medium-sized airport. So there's large hub, medium hubs, and small hubs. There's about 32 airports in the medium hub category. Sacramento is one of them in California. We are, Oakland is, Ontario. Burbank falls into medium hub. San Diego, LA, San Francisco are all large hub airports. And that's categorized by just by the total number of passengers that they serve. And so we're ranked by the FAA each year. So we can move on to the next slide here. So our mission and vision, every organization has one. I'm sure you've worked for organizations that have missions and visions. Ours is to connect, serve, and inspire. I think the serve and the word inspire to us is really representative of our community that we live in, the innovation that happens in the Valley. I think connecting is connecting people, connecting places, and connecting commerce. So many products come through our airport: fish, computer parts, bio life science, plasma, blood, all kinds of things travel through an airport. And we're really proud to be like a connection, like a service organization that connects our community to the world. And then, of course, our goal is always more of an outlier goal, is to transform how Silicon Valley travels. We want to be able to be your choice of airport when you do travel. And so we work really hard on trying to maintain the airlines we have here and a good mix of airlines. So there's some competition in airfare. And then we also love to be able to add new service destinations. But that's obviously been a little bit of a challenge lately. Okay, next slide, please. So we now are down to, we don't have 10 airlines anymore. That's changed a little bit. Obviously, with the Alaska-Hawaiian merger that happened, Spirit went into bankruptcy this year. And so we're down a little bit, down to 8 carriers, still serving about 40 nonstop destinations from San Jose. So you can get about anywhere you need to around the world if you're willing to make a connection out of San Jose. After the pandemic, we saw our highest number around 11.4 million passengers. We're floating this year closer to 10. We were 10 and a half. We're thinking it's just going to get a little lower this year, hopefully rounding out the year about 10.2 million passengers. But the peak passengers we ever saw here was right before COVID, and that was at 15.8 million passengers. So that's, you got to think half that number is outbound customers and the other half is inbound customers. So 68 million pounds of cargo, $4.3 billion in economic output. Like I said, we have 280 plus employees at the airport that carry this airport badge, but there's also 5,100, and it peaks sometimes at 5,600 people that we call airport employees, right? It doesn't matter if they work for FedEx, UPS, if they're a ground support, ground handler, jet fuel, a supplier, provider, they all work at the airport. So, you know, that along with visitor impact and the induced indirect jobs, you know, we believe that 19,000 jobs in the Valley are supported by having us as a major employer and a major supporter of San Jose. We generate about $55 million in tax revenue for the county each year and about $185 million in tax revenue for the state of California. So that's very impressive for what we are on 1,600 acres of property. Next slide, please, sir. So I am the director of aviation. My organizational chart is a city. Thanks, Mike, for calling it out. It is a city within a city. I have one assistant director. Her name is Patty Singh, Patricia. She basically manages the day-to-day operations of the airport. So think about CEO, COO in a company. But in this case, she's an assistant director. And with her are a bunch of deputy directors that I have that report to Patty. So Marta Baratoni just recently joined us from Palo Alto Networks, and she is a finance director. So she's also carries the title of CFO for the airport. Scott Whitner, which is where Julie fits into that organization, is our deputy director for marketing and communications. Jean Frazier runs all of our facilities and engineering. So all 1 million square feet and 16,000 individual components that we have: jet bridges, air handlers, hoses, air conditioners, all of that stuff, bathroom equipment, lighting. is all under Gene's world. When it comes to flight operations and aircraft safety and operational standards, meeting all the FAA inspections, that is Rosalind Bond. She's a 27-year veteran of San Jose Mineta. She grew up here. She graduated from San Jose State University with an aviation management degree. She actually teaches back at SJSU right now as a part-time faculty member. And that's our recruiting ground. These kids at SJSU who can't afford to be a pilot do move over to the aviation management side of the business. And she does a fantastic job there. But we are missing a planning and development director. We have about $168 million, $162 million. The number is going to change this year of capital projects, capital reinvestment into the airport. So we pay and we generate our own money, and then we pay our own money to build everything at the airport. There's not a single tax dollar that comes out of your paycheck or your wallet or your property taxes or your mill rates that support the airport at all. So we a zero dependent department. Thanks for the applause back there. I got that one. I caught it. So it's really critical that we invest wisely at the airport. So we're very careful. That's why we have good finance mechanism to run all that through. And we're very careful how we invest and spend our money. And then Matthew Kazmerzak on the far right side was a legal aid, actually a governmental affairs aide to Norm Mineta. Does anybody remember Norm? There we go. Look at that. Norm was a significant part of our history, a part of our community here. His family still is in touch with Matthew. Matthew worked for him in Washington, D.C., and then migrated back out here to California. And so he does governmental affairs for me. And he's also sort of like my chief of staff. So he runs strategy. He runs IT. He is head of our HR group too, all of our hiring. She's my Swiss Army knife. He does everything. And the whole organization revolves not around me. They revolve around Matthew. And he's right there with our executive team. Next slide, please. So 1,600 acres. San Jose Mineta is bound, obviously, by several highways. 880 is to your left side of your screen. You can't see it on the map, but 880 is our south boundary. 101 to the north, and then 87 to the east side of the airport. And then the west side obviously touches right up against Santa Clara. The west side of our airport, has anybody flown out of the west side? You know what's on the west side? It's all the money. That's where all the money is. So that's all the flex jets and the private jets. We need to start recruiting some people who fly out of the west side. Yeah. Hopefully they can pay for the lunches. But we have 2 FBOs. They're called fixed-based operators. Basically like a gas station, right? So they fuel your plane. They'll maintain your plane for you. You come in, you can park your plane there. They'll put it in a hangar. It's full service. A little bit expensive, but we see some pretty nice aircraft over there. There's one of, I think there's only one trillionaire in the world, right? He happens to now live in Austin, Texas, but he still has a plane here. And his Tesla is parked in one of those buildings. I won't tell you which one, but it's a bulletproof Tesla. And I have a picture on my phone if anybody wants to see it later. Yeah, it's crazy. Google has a lot of their fleet at this airport. And one of our biggest corporate aircraft operators is NetJets. So it's big business these days to do flex jets. So you can just use a credit card and you say, I've got money on my account. Today I want a 2-seater. Tomorrow I want 18 seats. Just give me a jet and they'll fly it in. They'll take you where you need to go. And it costs anywhere from, for what they call wide body. So a G700, a global, is about $4,500 an hour. So, do the math on that. If you're flying 4 hours to New York, it's a $20,000 trip, right? One way. So I'm sure I'll leave my hat in the room if anybody does do that. I'd be happy to take it. 2 parallel runways, both about 11,500 feet. 2 parallel runways will get you anywhere in the world. We're doing some sensitivity analysis now on the Airbus 350-1000 aircraft. It's one of the newer aircraft that Airbus came out with. We're looking at range. Can we get to Japan? Can that aircraft land here and take off with the challenges that we have being so close to downtown and still be able to hit parts of Asia? So We're running through that analysis. All the Asia service comes in between midnight and 2 a.m. So you can imagine all those challenges that we would have. But at some point, San Francisco is going to get full, and we're going to need to be able to back them up. But yeah, 2 parallel runways. And then on the east side is obviously Terminal A and Terminal B that has a total of 35 gates. We have capacity on the air side to get ourselves up to 18 million passengers a year. Our terminal land side, which is all of our roadway infrastructure, can only get us to about 14 million before we have to start figuring out how to manage some of the roadway traffic. But rental car, easy access, lots of garage parking, garage revenue and parking revenue, rental car revenue, Uber, Lyft, Waymo, Turo, all of those companies contribute to about 30% of our income. So that's a healthy amount of our revenue. The remainder of it comes from a mix of food and beverage and concession sales in the terminal, and then airline rents, fees and charges. So the airlines pay us like a landlord, right? We're the landlord, and then the airlines pay to lease a gate. They lease their jet bridges, they lease their parking positions, and everything else they pay for by bags or by passengers. So bag claim devices, bag makeup devices, the bag system itself, all of the space that TSA occupies is all calculated through a very long process called an airline use and lease agreement negotiation process. So it's like a union contract. Has anybody negotiated union contracts or been on a board at a union when you've gone through negotiations? This is going to take us, our agreement expires in 2029, but we're starting this coming summer to think about it. And how do we charge? There's been a change in the industry. Now everybody charges for bags, right? Before you could check in bags for free. So a lot of people would check their bags, and the airlines would be sneaky. They'd say, hey, look, I only want to pay for this portion of the bag system, and everybody else pay an equal portion. And now we're doing it. We should be charging per bag. And that's easy to do because the airline that produces the most amount of bags should be paying for most of the cost of the system. So looking at different business models. Next slide, please, sir. This is land south of 880. This is a very controversial bit of property for us. This was where our biggest challenge was with homeless population during COVID, if anybody recalls Columbus Park. For those that remember when these baseball fields were functional in the middle there, that is still city property. That was never purchased by the airport, but everything inside the red dashed lines was purchased by the airport to reduce noise for residents there, and then also mitigating conflict. If a plane ever had to land there, we hope not ever, knock on wood, we wouldn't be hitting any residents. So that was all purchased a long time ago. So it's FAA property technically because the FAA funds some improvements for the airport. And so we've purchased all of this land, and then some of it we've got what we call community benefit agreements. So the FAA allows us to use certain parcels for non-revenue generating purposes because because of the grant assurances we sign when we take grants from the FAA, we have to be self-sufficient. We have to be maintaining ourselves as an operation. So we need to generate money off of this land, but some of it just cannot be developed. So there's a rose garden there. We're going to put in a disc golf park here. We're going to rebuild the Columbus Park into the city is going to invest money there to put in 2 AstroTurf soccer fields. And right here is a parcel of property that we will probably look at some commercial facing Coleman, and the remainder we're looking at doing bioretention so that we can make some revenue off of that. So bioretention is, I grew up in Oklahoma, so we call it a drainage ditch. But in California, we have all kinds of cool names. But C3 bioretention is basically runoff from parcels of property that can't hold their own stormwater. So they buy a stormwater permit into somebody else's land. So we're going to build a lake that's just going to be empty because we can't allow birds to be there because that's right in the path of the arrivals of the runway. So we'll put mesh over it and people will give us money for it. So that's our plan. And then we'll put some paths and things like that around it. Next slide. Well, let me pause there. Is there any quick questions on what I've covered so far? Because I know there's going to be a lot. Yes, sir. That's great. We are still under a noise curfew that's noise decibel related. So the tower shuts down at 11:30 at night, and it opens back up at 4:30 in the morning. So it's all visual approach, Unicom frequency. If you're flying into the airport, you just tell your location of where you are before you land. The runway lights are on clickers, so they go bright, and then they go dim when nobody's using it. So it is a noise-based curfew. So yes. There was another question up front. Oh, great question. So, okay, do you really want the real scuttlebutt? So British Airways was flying here up until COVID. And we were 8 days away from getting 747-400 service into San Jose Mineta, one of the fat boys, I like to call them. Beautiful plane, double decker, well, now there's the A380, but we were 8 days away from getting it, and then COVID hit, and it all went away, right? And it all got sucked back up into SFO. So the airlines really just, when things get tight and things get lean, they just kind of vacuum themselves so they can have the least amount of employees, the highest amount of turns per gate, and they can reduce their real estate cost or operational costs. So they went away. So yes, they do want to come back. But the business model has changed since COVID. So we really need to build a larger lounge. We only have an 8,000 square foot lounge. And that is about a $30 million investment that we're probably going to start requesting for proposals in 2027 to see if a company will build it for us and then charge fees to recoup their money. And that'll put one part of that business equation back in place for any carrier, Asia carrier or Europe carrier, but British Airways is the target carrier. And then the other part is we need corporate response. And the corporations here have really changed post-COVID. We still have large headquarters and presence of large headquarters, but yet the employees have sort of decentralized outside of Silicon Valley. And so they don't really always fly in and out of the South Bay. They might have moved to Austin or Provo, Utah, or Boise because cost of living is lower, and technology really allows, some of your children might be in the world of technology and moved away. So we've really got to get business service back and filling the front of the plane that makes the most amount of money on a weekly basis, and a lounge to make their business plan work. Did you have a follow-up question for me? You're hitting the nail on the head of some of our biggest challenges is allowing people to understand that there's enough lift, what we call lift, or amount of people that want us to go to London and back between San Francisco and San Jose. Right now they have an A380, a 777 on BA, and then they have 2 777s on Virgin Atlantic a day that are going to London. That's a lot of lift. They're operating at about a 93% load factor, so about 93% of the seats are full going to London. So there is the opportunity to add an extra flight. Do they add it into SFO, or do they start a new city and take a risk? That's where we need our local population to actually commit to it. We need CEOs from the South Bay, and we need to bring these companies to say, we support our local airport, because you read earlier, it supports our local economy. Right? It generates hotel nights. It generates expenses that people are on, expense reports that people are on, and they spend their money in our city. That's what we need to generate that tax base. Yes, sir. Yeah, great question on how do we handle large events. I think a few years ago, I can't remember, I think it was the Asia Summit where the president was here and a bunch of G7 or G10 leaders were all in the Bay. And along with that came a bunch of private jets and sheikhs and kings and sultans from, is that the right word? I don't know what you say for, yeah. A lot of Middle Eastern kings and queens that came. So we expect some of that to happen with World Cup. Qatar 747-800 is planned to be here for one of the World Cup games. But we work with the Office of Protocol quite closely here in Silicon Valley. There are people that travel here, but they don't like to be known that they're here. But when GTC happens, NVIDIA's conference every year, we do get some heavy traffic. I think we had enough capacity to serve about 120 private jets, I think, 130 private jets. We didn't see that many this year for Super Bowl. We saw about 50 or so. And so Super Bowl happened, March Madness happened, and now we've got 6 World Cup games coming later this year. All right, so I'm going to carry on with my presentation, and then thanks for asking those questions, and then we'll carry on. So we're highly regulated in the airport space. So it's not just I have a mayor, I have council members, I have a city manager, assistant city manager, and a deputy city manager to please every day. I also have the federal government, the Department of Homeland Security, FAA. It's a very critical relationship. So when the FAA is not funded, when the tower is not funded, when TSA agents aren't funded, I didn't have on my bingo card last year to run a soup kitchen. I really didn't. But we were taking donations every day from Martha's Kitchen. There's a couple of other organizations, some people that own some fast food restaurants here in town. They were bringing food, they were bringing cash, gift cards and cash to the airport. And we were supporting about 140 employees, I think, on the TSA side. That's what we were feeding. And that's very unfortunate. These people don't make more than about $30,000 a year on average across the country. So maybe here in the Bay Area, it's a lot more than that, but it's not enough to survive on. So a lot of our TSA agents love who we are because we build a culture at our airport. And through that culture and that relationship, we had a 94% show up rate at the first shutdown that happened in November. And so a lot of those employees got the praises and the checks from Chrissy Nome. But this time around, they're still under a government shutdown. Right now, there was about a $10 billion slush fund that was given to Department of Homeland Security, and the president signed an executive order to at least pay the employees out of that fund, but it's not going to last very long until, our legislature can think straight. So the industry obviously continues to consolidate. There's going to be more consolidation. Our 5 biggest carriers at SJC, Alaska, American, Delta, Southwest, United. Southwest is almost 60% of our market. They fly the most amount of flights a day. Right now we have about 85 flights a day. But as you can see, we're an ever-changing landscape. Ever-changing meaning lots of consolidation that happens on the left side of the screen here and fewer carriers. Unfortunately, that means consolidation. That means fares go up, costs go up, but the industry is constantly changing, and there's always somebody who's a billionaire that really strives to become a millionaire, and they start a new airline. So we're just waiting for somebody dumb to wake up one day with $1 billion and says, I'm going to start a new airline. So we'll always see that. And there's a few out there, Breeze Airlines, Avelo, Sun Country just merged with Allegiant. So there are some smaller carriers out there that are trying to make a go at it. But this morning's briefing, which really depressed me, was that the crack spread, which is the cost of refining crude oil into jet fuel, is almost, I think it's like almost $6 now. On average, it's like $4 a gallon. And that number we haven't seen since 2008 when we had that economic crisis. So the country's been rolling along pretty flat, but with undulating disposable income, and it's just a challenge right now. But there's always going to be something that's going to push us into a recession, and so we'll have to kind of wait and see. Next slide, please, sir. So as I mentioned, on the west side of the airport, the FBOs, Signature and Atlantic are our 2 largest FBOs. We're very fortunate to have 126 billionaires that live in the 2 counties in the valley. 126 billionaires and 146,000 millionaires. Now, for you homeowners in the room, you have a home, so you're technically a millionaire. But the 146,000 that I'm referring to are outside of household wealth. So this is liquid. It's $1.1 trillion of liquid cash in the valley between San Mateo and Santa Clara County. But then again, not to move away from my slide deck, if any of you follow Russ Hancock and the joint venture Silicon Valley, the annual state report this year says about 25% of our population is living on food assistance in the valley. And then those that rent, like me, on average are spending 50% of their income on rent. So we're not as stable as we hope we could be. There was a story in the Mercury this morning about cracks in the economy in the South Bay. So move on, please, if you could. Destinations. Like we said, we've got 40 nonstop destinations. Our furthest destination is Tokyo, followed by the Hawaiian Airlines. We'll continue to work on getting more East Coast nonstop service. So we would love, when we saw the outmigration during COVID, the nonstops that we really need is New York, Charlotte, Miami. Those are the destinations where the tech economy sort of dispersed to that we currently don't serve. We can serve Salt Lake City. Texas is a big hub now for outmigration from California. So we've got good service everywhere else, but those key markets on the East Coast are something that we're continuing to work on. And I have an air service development guy who, that's his full-time job every day. Next slide, please. Monthly passengers. I'll kind of skim over this, but you can see the 2026 mark. It's a little bit troubling. We're just a representative of the economy, and we don't control this number. We are a facilitator. So it is people's disposable income and how much money they have at the end of the month and how they want to spend their money is the consumer's choice. And then our job is to convince the airline that these people have a lot of money left over and this is where they need to go. So we always are trying to push for new service. But as this kind of, some of this is all post-COVID, we are trending in some uncomfortable waters right now, but we're still financially stable. Next slide, please. And so this kind of goes, you can barely see last year, 2025 at 10.2, 10.7 in 2025 is where we ended. Our peak year post-COVID was 11.9, but you can see this is the state of the economy in the South Bay. I believe that airports are a good litmus test for how healthy your economy is. And so we were floating right at Y2K around 13 million passengers, right? And then we kind of dipped during the dot-com boom, we were doing pretty healthy. That dot-com boom just lasted a couple of years, right? 9/11 happened, and then SARS happened, and then the Great Recession happened, and then COVID happened. And you see we are stable. We're very healthy at 8 million, at 10 million. We can support our facilities at 13 million and 15 million, but we always have to be flexible. And so this is a job not for the faint-hearted. Faint-hearted, I guess is the right word. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so my heart rate is actually it was 128/72 today. I had to visit the doctor this morning, so it was good. But I think we're pretty stable right now. Next slide, please. We do a comprehensive financial statement like a private company would do. And it's all public. It's out on our website. We talk through everything, our leases, our revenues, our expenses, our debt. We have about just shy of $1,968 million of outstanding debt. My mortgage payment to run the 1 million square feet of space, $70 million a year, right? So I have to worry about my household costs, my children, which are my 200 employees, the number of cars we have in the garage, how much food it costs to feed these children and this family, and then the roof, the house that I put together, and that house costs $70 million a year. Okay, carry on. We've already talked about this: parking fees, terminal fees, concessions, landing fees. That's pretty much our sources of revenues. Next slide. Operating revenues, like I mentioned, I didn't mention the terminal rent part, about 34%. Parking and roadways is almost about 30% of our income. There's other general aviation fees that come in, landing fees, facility fees. Next slide. Expenses. There you go. The green is my pretty hefty debt there, debt and amortization. It costs a lot to run an airfield at 14% of my total cost. Running parking garages, keeping them well lit, and then terminal buildings and concessions. That's a big expense to operate. Many bathrooms at the airport, many flushing toilets, keeping carpet, repaired and in good seating. All those kinds of things are very expensive to operate. And then my staff and family cost about 14% of my income. Next slide, sir. We'll quickly slide over this. This is really meant for council members that kind of understand where our budget is, what our expenses are like. At SFO, it costs about $24 for every outbound passenger. So for every enplaning passenger, it costs that amount of money to operate SFO. and Oakland is about $15. We were floating about $18 this last year. That's an average expense of just running the budget. Next slide, please. Landing fees, terminal rents, again, similar information. Carry on to the next slide. Debt service, here you go, about $1 billion of debt. Some of this is, relatable. Passenger facility charges is the $4.50 on a ticket. If you rent a car, you'll pay about $9 a day for the first 4 days if you rent a car. This is sort of just the mechanics of how our cash flows happen. We keep about 600 days of cash on hand to make sure that we show our bondholders that we're able to make our mortgage payment. Next slide. There we go. Now we're at the questions. Any more questions? I think from this side, okay, there you go. That's a great question. I don't think we've ever done that analysis because we never sell the airport. The airport is a city-owned entity. Technically, the FAA funds certain portions by grant, but the city owns the land and operates the facility. So it's kind of hard to put value to it, like an animal shelter or a fire station. I would think the loss in income and the tax base itself would have to be also thrown into the pro forma if you shut down the airport, consolidate everything at Oakland or San Francisco. And so, yeah, you'd have to do a run rate analysis on that. So the city issues the debt, the airport owns the debt, right? So, like I mentioned, yeah, they're bonds. And so we have bondholders. We go to bondholder conferences all the time and we with Vanguard and Putnam and Fidelity, some of the bigger names. Yeah, so the $1 billion is, we have a lot of debt that can be recast every 10 years, a callable date. So we've got our 2017 debt that we issued is now at 10 years. So it matures where we can actually recast and renegotiate our rates. Coupon rate is about 5% right now on average. And there's some debt that we're going to refinance in December this year. That is a great question. It's very hard because we recast some of our debt frequently when times like this hit. And so we'll carve out the debt cycle so that we can actually maintain some of our operating costs. Our goal always is our airlines make the decision to help us because they're a party stakeholder to the agreement and they backstop all of our payments. Yeah, Marta is my CFO at the airport. All of that detail is 100% public. It's in the annual CAFR report. Yep. The disc golf course parks department will do that. Yes. That will be a question to the parks department when they've got some money to do it. Yeah. Yes, sir. They're coming up on about 20 years old. Typically, you'll do core testing about 30 years. We do a pavement analysis every 5 years where we stress test every bit of pavement and it's tracked, because that's what we submit to the FAA to help pay for some of that reconstruction. They give us about 80% of the revenue. The other 20% we fund through our general funds at the airport. So we're close to the end of their useful life, and then we'll have to go do some work. We've got to rebuild one of our taxiways, but it's a little complicated because it's just 75 feet too close to the runway. So we've had an operating agreement with the tower for years, and now they want us to relocate it. It's about $500 million. So $100 million will come from us. About $400 million will come from the FAA. Who determines that's necessary? So a part of the complicated nature of the property south of 880 is that there's a relationship between the city and the airport and the city's park department to activate some of that land. Because if you leave it dormant, then nobody's going to mow it. Nobody's going to be responsible for it. And so the city parks department is the one that is trying to create some level of activity so that it doesn't become either a homeless population growth there, or it doesn't become a trash dump or something like that. So the parks department really works on a lot of that master planning. Yeah, great question. So will we ever see a people mover inside the terminal post security? The facility is almost like a mile long if you go from one end to the other, right? Feels very long. It is a bit of a challenge. We have added moving carts during the holiday season, but it's so narrow because of the Guadalupe River and 87, and then where the roadways sit, the width of the terminal can't be any bigger because then you're going to impact parking positions for the aircraft and the taxiways and the runways. So due to the narrow nature of it, it's very difficult to put moving walkways in. And now we've rolled out some autonomous wheelchairs. So yes, it's a company called Blueberry. We're working with them. They're based in Silicon Valley, and they are the ones that are running autonomous vehicles. So great questions. Thank you so much for having me here.